What's the best way you've gotten back at a dickhead boss slash coworker? Back in my early 20s, I worked as a delivery driver at a bar slash pizza joint close to the main college drag. After about 4 months of working there, just enough time to get in good with the rest of the staff, the owner hires a friend of his to manage the joint as a current manager had just left. This guy was the epitome of power trip for no reason asshole boss. He would call you out for little mistakes, make you stay late to help do his job, throw you under the bus when talking to the owner, always bail early, and was convinced everybody liked him, the real deal. We even caught him stealing from our tip jars a couple of times, but the owner never did anything about it. Anyway, I had planned to go out one night with a girl I had just met and wanted to get off work a bit early. Go home and wash the pizza smell off me, I asked. We'll call him Donnie if that was possible, and he lost his shit. You would have thought I asked for a raise, bonus, and a 6-month vacation, despite the fact that 3 drivers from the next shift had showed up already. He started shouting, "What? Are you stupid? We have 3 deliveries up. You can stay until your shift is over." That's cool, I thought. He is well within his, albeit asshole, right to make me stay until my shift is over with. I sucked it up and started getting the last deliveries together. However, when he saw where I was taking one of the pizzas, he ordered, not asked, me to pick him up a chocolate shake from a drive-thru joint close by. I flat out told him, no fucking way. You expect me to do you a favor when you won't do me one? Suck it. I grabbed the pizzas and stormed out. Donnie yelling from the kitchen something like, haha, it's at getting all political. Or I think he's mad. Granted, his past behavior had factored into how angry I was over something pretty minor, but I was fucking furious. The universe had reached its douche quota and beckoned to me to teach this fuck a lesson. As I was driving away from the last delivery, I called the store, got Donnie on the phone, apologized and said I would get him his milkshake, even pay for it. I went by the drive-thru of the fast food place to get a 32 ounces chocolate milkshake and then made a beeline to the grocery store right down the street to pick up a family-sized bottle of chocolate flavored X-Lax. I poured half of the shake out for me to enjoy later, of course, and mixed in 13 to 15 ounces of X-Lax. Remember, 2 TBSP or whatever will give you a healthy case of the runs. After giving it to him, he said something about it tasting funny, but still managed to inhale that son of a bitch like a true fat boy. He didn't even say thanks. Fast forward 3 hours or so, date lady and I are cruising the bars and head into the bar slash pizza joint I worked at. Instantly, the cook makes eye contact with me and comes rushing over, practically falling over patrons. Barely able to contain himself, he tells me, in hysterics, Donnie is having uncontrollable, violent blowshits. He's been in the bathroom since you left, has shit his pants already, and is making this place smell like an open sewer. I go back to the kitchen and Donnie is nowhere in sight. Right as I start to talk to a fellow pizza slave, though, he comes rushing from the bathroom, pants half on slash half off, one hand out in front, and one hand holding his balloon not shut. He had exhausted the entire restaurant's toilet paper supply and was heading to the bar next door. Best part? He lived about 40 miles away and continued shitting himself periodically throughout the trip home. Despite everybody knowing the true story, though, he never figured it out and blamed the fast food joint for his wild ride on the Hershey Highway. At the age of 15, I was doing humble freelance work designing a restaurant menu for a small business owned by family members. The owner insisted I would email the entire completed menu just to look at it. I was told a printed copy didn't cut it. I had not yet received any payment, and they made it pretty clear they just wanted to start printing copies and not pay me. So, I make the entire menu have the Watermark superimposed on it, not with my name, not with a logo, with the word poop. I explained that it would be removed when I got my money, which I did. I worked as an installer in a remote office. I traveled a lot for work, often spending weekends on site. This was fine under my old boss. who gave me a lot of leeway by letting me work from home, gave me comp time, etc. After 4 years, I got a new boss. Also, the company laid off everyone in my office, about 100 people. New boss insisted I come in anyway, 45-minute drive, to sit in an empty office. But I still had to travel Sunday through Friday, with no overtime and no comp time. When I complained to hours, the hour manager told me that since I'm salaried, if they wanted me to work 80 hours a week, I would work 80 hours and I shouldn't expect any compensation. Everyone I talked to seemed to think this was true. Salaried equals get overtime. This didn't make sense to me. I called the local state Dept of Labor office, told them what I did, what I'd been told. They told me to get a lawyer, and if they didn't rectify this, for every dollar they owed me, they would have to pay the state 50 cents in penalties. Which is what I did. In a matter of 4 months, I settled out of court, got a new job, got a severance, and made my boss do an exit interview, where I told her if she'd been halfway considerate and legally complained, she wouldn't have to scramble to cover for the next state scheduled installs by flying people out from the East Coast and paying them overtime. TL. Doctor, I sued them for 5 years of overtime. Got 40 grand. Severance package. Letter of recommendation. And told my boss off. I was a typesetter when it was still done on dedicated typesetting machines, not desktop. This is pretty specialized work and demanded pretty good pay. I agreed to take one job at less than my usual hourly pay for 6 weeks while I learned their system, one I hadn't used before. Well, 6 weeks came and went, and I didn't see my promised raise. In the meantime, the horrible shrew of a pastoop artist went out sick, and I was left doing both type and layout. A very important project came up, and there was only me to do it. Without me, they'd be totally and royally fucked, even if they could find a typesetter who could do pastoop. There was just no time to run the ad, hire and train one. I reminded the owner and manager of the raise I'd been promised when I was hired, and how long ago that was. Then I put all my personal desk choxes in a box and told them they had until end of business to make a decision. I got my raise, retroactive to my hire date, by 5 PM. I spent a ton of my boss money, ran up his credit cards, drank his beer, ate his food, and even slept with his wife. He knows about all of it and isn't even pissed. Full disclosure, I'm self-employed. Worked in a bakery / lunch and sandwich shop / coffee bar. I worked in the back as a baker. I took the orders from all the smaller coffee shops around town that the local chain owned, and baked all the bagels, cookies, muffins, wraps, etc. Occasionally we had catering orders, to do which I did a significant chunk of time onto my day. My asshole boss didn't feel it was necessary to tell me about them until the last possible moment. There's a lot of prep work that goes into making 1,000 ham and cheese sandwiches. Prep work that can be done days in advance. Things like slicing all the cheese and meat, or mixing our own mustard. He didn't give a fuck if I stayed until 3 AM on a school night. I was in high school. Most of the time I didn't care that he broke child labor laws. I kind of wanted the job. But finally the straw that broke the camel's back was the 3rd catering order he didn't tell me about a week in advance, like he should have. It was a huge, important luncheon for the company itself, feeding over 3,000 people. I had to make hundreds of baked goods and sandwiches and about 30 quarts of 3 types of soups. He told me about all of this 18 hours before it had to be loaded into a truck and delivered to the event. I sighed at him and said I'd take care of it, but I called him an asshole for not telling me a week in advance. I can make the soup and refrigerate it. All sorts of things to cut down on my workload. I had a test the next day and I wanted to study. This was at 5 PM the day before he left for the day. I was the only one capable of making all the food that were on staff. I told everyone else on staff what he did, and since there's a mutual hatred among my co-workers, they all agreed not to tell him. The next thing I did, I walked out without preparing an ounce of food. I left a note on the table in the back, calling him an inept moron incapable of managing a simple lunch diner and incapable of being a social person. I suggested he be more considerate and kind to his employees. Should he demand such respect from them? I walked out and quit. Not even 2 weeks notice. Fuck that guy. When I came back for my paycheck a week later, he tried to intimidate me in his office while handwriting my check. He said, "Name. You know, that's not the best way to make friends." I replied, "Yep. I generally try to make friends by being nice and respecting people. You should take lessons from me." I was the smartest kid. As far as I know, he got fired for letting 3,000 people go hungry at a huge corporate event. TL. Doctor, retarded boss can't manage. Inconsiderate. I used to have a boss who was an asshole. He was the manager of the clothing store I worked in. He tried to hire young girls under legal working age. Here that age is 16. They were usually 13 or 14. So he could try and sleep with them. He sexually harassed every girl he worked with. We were a small retail store of 6 or so employees. I ended up having to phone our head office several times to stop him from hiring underage girls and from harassing the employees. And by harassing, I mean groping. Talking about all the dirty things he wanted to do to girls, etc. He used to take 2-hour breaks when we were short-staffed/busy, paid himself overtime every week, and often would not show up for shifts, forcing the person who was already on staff to work overtime, which we wouldn't be paid for, because he would modify all our time cards on the computer until he decided to show up. I also knew, while he was working during his shifts, he would put on merchandise to try it on for size, and then would conveniently forget he had put it on, and would leave with it. It took a long time of planning to get my story straight with how I was going to catch him, but eventually I got him to text me, admitting to having not paid for something he'd taken. 1 week later I used the texts as evidence to have him fired. Then I took him to court for all the threats/harassment he'd been doing over the last 10 months of working with him. I worked in the ID department of a rather large law firm. A guy I was sort of friends with that worked a couple desks down from me had kind of a bad attitude and ended up getting into a long feud with the tech support manager, who was, admittedly, a stupid cow. He ended up getting fired over the feud, and I think just his general attitude. He called to tell me about it the night it happened. I was working on a project after hours, so I wasn't there when it happened. The next day, my boss calls the department into a meeting to tell us that my pseudo friend had quit, but that because he was in it and had access to all the passwords, that they were not allowed to give him 2 weeks notice. This was, of course, complete bullshit. Everyone knew that he got fired, and everyone knew our boss was lying through his teeth. So, fast forward about 6 months later, I had just come through being scapegoated big time for some stuff I wasn't even remotely responsible for, and I could see the writing on the wall that they were working on building a case to get me canned. It just so happened that I got a job offer through a referral from a friend that worked at another company. So, when the offer came through for about 6k more, I did a little dance, and then I shut the hell up. My girlfriend was a flight attendant at the time, so we planned a little last-minute getaway between jobs. The day before we were scheduled to leave for Europe, I came into work, did my best to close out all my issue, put out any fires I could, for the sake of my coworkers, and then I marched in and handed my boss my letter of resignation, effective immediately. He read the letter. There was a long pause, and then he asked me when I wanted my last day to be. I looked at him for a minute, savoring the trap, and reminded him that, because I had access to all the sensitive system passwords, I wasn't allowed to give/take 2 weeks notice. His jaw hit the ground. He muttered some sentence fragments, and it was pretty clear I caught him in a lie. The best part was, while we were living it up in Italy a few weeks later, I checked in on my bank account at a cyber cafe and saw that my direct deposit had cleared a check for the pay period for 2 weeks after I left. So even though I didn't work it, I was given my 2 weeks notice and salary. That extra paycheck essentially paid for an extra week in Europe, and that extra week was by far the best part of the trip. Only kind of related. but had a verbally abusive boss who would make physically impossible demands and thought she was queen of the workplace, which she was cause her supervisors let her do whatever, even after I reported all this. So during one of her tantrums, in which about 12 hours of work is being laid on me at 4 PM, that has to be done by tomorrow, I tell her, fine, I quit. You can't quit. You have to give 2 weeks notice. What? No, I don't. Goodbye and good luck with all that work that needs to be done before tomorrow. Very satisfying. This is a true story. I absolutely swear. It's also past any statute of limitations, and probably before any real laws existed in any form. So, had a jerkwad that started at a failing.com with me. Within the first week he decided he wanted to fire me even though he had no idea what I did. etc. etc. I was actually the only it person at this point, and was probably one of the more productive people in the entire building. He told me I had a week to turn things around if I was gone. First of all, there was no explanation as to what needed to be turned around, or what in particular was wrong. My assumption is that he had his own guy he wanted to bring in. etc. I basically told him to shove it up his asterisk, and if he didn't like it, I'd walk right there. He was a bit taken back by that, and after another 9 months of being there, he was not quite a jerk, but still a jerk. Fast forward another 3 months and we decided we were going to fire him. The decision was based on information I had provided to them in regards to his lack of performance and wasting of company resources. Irony, right? The owners, against my recommendation, gave him advanced notice of their decision and let him stay for an entire day in his office without any supervision, etc. As I didn't trust him, I was monitoring his activity very closely. I discovered that he was copying a large amount of data from our servers and deleting it. Additionally, he was cleaning out his contacts and other client-related information, not personal. He was copying all of this to a USB drive. On the final day, the owners took him to lunch. Right before he was going to leave, I took the opportunity to return all of the data he took. I had backups which I was going to restore. However, I didn't want him to walk away with stuff that didn't belong to him. Finally, a couple very incriminating emails accidentally got forwarded to his wife. He was cheating on her for months and was talking to this other chick about ditching her and screwing her out of HTE house and stuff and leave her with the kids. Not sure how that worked out, but hopefully for the better. Guy was a bit of a scumbag. In regards to the emails, no, I was not snooping his private stuff. They were in his work account, and when I was removing the items that he took, they were discovered. 1. Had vacation pics of the happy cheating couple of as well, lol.